Monte Carlo sampling kind of rules the world, right? Even, 𝗏1 is Monte Carlo algorithm of some kind. AlphaGo is Monte Carlo algorithm.
𝗓𝗡𝗡𝗢 said in one of his books that, you could do everything with Monte Carlo, and never forget that, because I hated when you said that, but
Right. Monte Carlo sucks on classical computers, right? It absolutely sucks. Because every step you got to do a really complicated classical computation before you do the next step, right? So what if, our first chip, the superconductor, is very natural. We use, electron fluctuations as our natural Monte Carlo steps. And those fluctuations, the plasma frequencies of these electrons in these superconductors is like 80 gigahertz. So, I think in my early quotes, it was like, yeah, it's, simulating, doing the Monte Carlo algorithm to simulate what the chip is doing. It would take us hundreds of GPU hours to simulate, tens of nanoseconds, right? So it's like, okay, that's the speed up, right? There's no complexity class separation like quantum, but it's just a big and constant factor improvement. CMOS is going to be slightly different, right? There's somewhat of a downgrade in terms of energy efficiency and speed, but the trade-off there is that it's mass scale manufacturable and we could just ship it at scale, right? And we thought that that's more important in the near term than having the ultimate substrate, that is not economically practical, right? So yeah, I mean, we're pretty bullish on this. The same reason Feynman proposed quantum computers, right? Feynman proposed quantum computers, like if nature is quantum mechanical, if you're gonna make a simulation in nature, better make it quantum mechanical, right? So you gotta run on a quantum computer. So similarly, nature is stochastic, and there's a lot of out of equilibrium thermodynamic systems. So you better run it on a stochastic thermodynamic computer. So that's the thesis, and a lot of models of our world and simulations of our world just naturally fit better on this type of computer than a deterministic computer. And I think people are just going to have a lot of speed ups for a lot of stuff. So honestly, I'm like overwhelmed by the potential of this. Genuinely, I think there's far more areas of application than quantum computing. And I just want to open it up and just sell everyone chips, and it's going to be a crazy gold rush. I mean, that's what we're hoping for. But yeah, I must preface, I also chugged an energy drink like an hour ago, and I'm very locked in right now. But I want
that's your job. For Nvidia, I mean, they almost failed so many times because it wasn't clear what anyone would use those boxes for, and they eventually found a foothold in a kind of a small industry, and they stayed alive with it in gaming, and then they just fortuitously sort of are the kings of AI now. So, we don't know what the future holds for QC or thermodynamic computing necessarily, but, I think it's really exciting what you're doing. And, if you were publicly traded, you'd probably be, I'm staggered by IonQ's valuation of 7 billion. It's just like incredible.
Yeah. Number. And I contrast that with my friends that went public, right, with Zapata and the SPAC, and it didn't go well. And it's not clear to me, beyond that Air Force contract, like what the big gap is. I don't know.
No,
it's
totally
just
yeah. Well, I think I'd rather trade $7 billion. I'd rather have $7 billion than all of the capital stock of IonQ. So I think anybody would.
Yeah, I think it's like the perfect market arb of like, investors on the West Coast are very open-minded, and if you're doing a risky project, that's important. But then on the East Coast is where your intellectual capital, you could farm it because people are ready to get their hands dirty and grind. And I don't know, have you noticed a delta between the engineering culture in New York and SF now that you're also bi-coastal a bit? Or
I mean, it's I think it's proportional to how you pay people too. I mean, if you give people equity, they seem to work a little harder, and you have to find a way. It's also a manager's job, right? Like your job is to set the example and make sure that if you're chugging an energy drink and in the office at 10 p.m., everyone else is going to be too. And if you're leaving at 5 p.m. because you got to go to the umpteenth party, for no reason, meet the same people you already met, your staff is going to not want to do that and check out early and start thinking about working somewhere else. So manager's job to pump up the troops and get them working hard and going crazy. And I think you can do that anywhere, to be honest. But I also think that, there are more people in New York excited about that, and probably somewhat less people in San Francisco excited about that. There is a lot more work-life balance there, from what I can tell. And that probably sounds crazy to some people because to a lot of people, there isn't a whole lot of work-life balance in either jurisdiction. But New York, there's a lot of distractions. There aren't so many in San Francisco. Like, it really is kind of a city that goes to bed pretty quickly, I think.
You'd be surprised. I think like it's more like people get into house parties and they have intellectual conversations, and to me actually San Francisco is more distracting than any other city because there's actually interesting high IQ people that I really want to talk to, and or like other founders or whatever in a very high density. And
That is true.
every time I'm there, it's like it's tough. Like on a Friday, it's like, oh, there's a bunch of really smart people, and they all run companies that are important too. And then you can compare notes and get insights, and there's actual like even if you're mission oriented, like you'll go to a party and then you'll meet like some PayPal mafia member stochastically, right? And at one event, and there's always events like this that happen like randomly. The fact that that tail event had so much value for your business, your life, that one connection kind of keeps you hooked, right? And that's kind of the danger. It's the FOMO. And so for me, the solution is to be the complete opposite coast. And so there's a friction term for me to go up. No, but yeah, that's how I felt about it. SF, honestly. It's just like there's a lot of like it's not just socializing for socializing. It's actually, there's a lot of upside to it. But I feel like in the early years of the company, I think like you got to maximize your luck and got to make a lot of connections. But when you're kind of locked in and you know what your product is and what you got to execute on and you have those connections already built, it's good to just go heads down, right? And you can do that from elsewhere.
Yeah, and you still need your troops to be really excited about the mission. And the more older I get, the more I realize like that's the primary job of an entrepreneur. That's just to pump up your guys. And if you think about Elon as being like the chief pumper, he's just so good at motivating his squad to do otherworldly things that they didn't probably think they could even accomplish for. And a lot of the times they're the first time anyone's accomplishing them. And it all comes from the top. If the person at the top's optimistic, even like unreasonably so, a lot of great things can happen. But if the person at the top is kind of checked out, sending the wrong message, et cetera, that's when the company falls apart typically. So I think it's hard to run a bi-coastal company, although it has been done. You are upping the difficulty level of the game a bit. It's a bit easier when everyone's in the same room. I sometimes joke that if we were going to move to San Francisco, that everyone's coming, and that's it. And because the guys I work with and gals I work with, I mean, we're basically just with each other 24/7 anyway. So at the end of the day, like where exactly we are makes no difference. So I'm curious how you deal with that, or if you're a remote work guy, or how you think of it.
Yeah, no. So I think like for speed in the first year of the company is like we'll hire people wherever they are, but over time we've actually physically concentrated into 95% of people in the same room, more or less. So yeah, that's been a big unlock, right? And the way to see it is just like if you're all in the same room, you can have kind of these random message passing between the different human cores, right? Like I see like a company as like a multi-core processor, multiple brains, and like obviously they interconnect, lower latency. The latency like online on Slack or like calls is like really long, right?
Noisy.
Like and noisy. And multi-way calls are weird. You don't have the body language, and like tensions can build. I know that was the case in my previous jobs. Like people have never met. They worked together for 2 years, and it's like, they don't have any rapport, they don't have any trust built, they don't know the other person's vibe, and so it's not good. So I think, over the past year or so, we very much physically concentrated, and that's really helped us move much faster. There's one way to do a decentralized company. It's like hub and spoke model, where maybe the executives are passing the messages around, and then you have like compartmentalized teams doing like a chunk of the technology that's kind of more insular. But then you want to make moves that cut across the stack, and that's difficult. And so I think CEOs should be wherever they're needed, right? So sometimes seeing investors, sometimes going to customers, sometimes it's as much as possible on the front lines in the office with the guys and gals. And you seem to be a front lines leader as well.
I think
so
it's mandatory. I don't know how remote work guys do it, and I think it's doable. Like the Nvidia guys kind of do it that way, and to me, they still have offices, one, and then two, like it's doable. It's just a difficulty level adjustment that, why make things harder? Like at the end of the day, this is one of the hardest things to do successfully. We've cycled through products and finally got PMF. We're growing 50% month over month, or 80% last month, and almost profitable. Really lucky. We knocked it out of the park with one product. We haven't even launched the product yet, which is even crazier. So we're doing well, but I don't know if I would, in a million years, want to make this harder, because so many startups fail. Even if you have good management, good idea, good investors, you still have a good 50-50 chance of failing, even if you have everything perfect. So it's just so hard. You need luck to break your way. A big customer comes through, or whatever it is, a huge hire comes in. You can call it luck or skill, but there is a little bit of randomness to it. And the making anything harder is just why. And it certainly doesn't mean that if it's 50-50 and you by doing remote, you're making it, I don't know, 45% likely that you succeed. Maybe that is a random number. Why would you make it harder? And I think that obviously there are talented people all around the world, and you want to accommodate them, but do you introduce all that noise and friction that you mentioned, and make it sort of really difficult to actually prosper? But in any event, there's a lot of other startups that are exciting. I'm sure you've caught up with the news about, say, 𝗫𝗏, or a few of the other like trad accelerator, TPU wannabe kind of companies. Those are somewhat interesting to me. I don't know if they'll ever make it or not, but they do seem to be raising money, at least.
I would say, as Moore's law sort of slows down for digital computing, I think what we're seeing, I think you could maybe make analogies with sort of evolutionary theory, and when, like, do you want to have like one species that's like really strong and general purpose, or do you want to have a bunch of small specialized species, right? It's kind of like I think basically I think, like, because things are slowing down, I think we're going to see a speciation of compute. We're already seeing this away from just the CPU eating every workload to now CPU, GPU, and then now CPU, GPU, TPU, and alternatives thereof, other alternatives. I think over time you're going to see this sort of speciation of compute. Of course, like, they can specialize for different workloads, but GPUs still dominate now because you don't have a sharp prior over the space of computations you're doing. When you buy your compute, right? Like, let's say your xAI or whatever, and you buy a bunch of GPUs, you don't know what model you're going to run on them, beforehand. You just know you're going to run some models, and GPUs are kind of like, pretty flexible. So, I think like people like 𝗏𝗏 and so on, good luck. But I think like ASICs, for example, people are talking about ASICs. It's like, I don't know about that, like you're probably still iterating on the architecture model quite a bit. I don't know how you're going to support that with the like pre-baked architecture. But maybe neural nets change that. The fact that neural nets are general purpose computers, and technically you're always running the same parametric computation, means that you can make one chip for many applications in a way, because transformers are kind of general computers that are dynamically reconfigurable. But that's TBD. But I guess we're going to see, right? But I think we're at an interesting point in compute history where some things are going to change. I don't know if Nvidia is going to dominate forever. I don't think that's plausible.
Now we're excited.
I think also
everyone's picking their pens up off the page. The
Oh,
end of
okay,
Nvidia.
yeah, Nvidia.
Jeff
I mean,
Jesus says Nvidia will end.
well, no, but I'm gonna end Nvidia eventually. But what? I mean, it's gonna take some time. It's gonna take some time. But I think I think what's gonna happen with us is people are gonna reject it because it doesn't fit their prior. It's too disruptive and so on. It's gonna take time. There's gonna be a niche community that builds around it, and then over time, it's gonna be disruptive. And then by the time people wake up, they're gonna look at our technology. They're gonna be like, "This is entirely alien. This is not like our typical computers." And it's like, "Yep." And then that's when the disruption really starts. But for now, I would say for the next 5 years, Nvidia is going to be a pretty dominant player. Again, for the reason I explained, you buy a GPU, and you can do all sorts of computations, and these TPUs and so on. Like Grok, for example, you need to know what computation you want to do and kind of pre-compile it for it to be really fast. Like I used Google TPUs on the inside quite a bit. Inside the matrix, if you will.
Two different things for me and you.
If you have a sharp prior over the space of computations, you can kind of pre-bake the compilation step, and that's what Grok is doing with these LLMs. So that's how they get these big speed ups. Usually, for random computation that you don't know what you're gonna execute, there's a big big overhead of compiling to, say, a TPU. Grok is the former TPU team, right? So I would imagine the architectures are similar. That's why they're offering their inference API instead of offering it as a general purpose computer, right? From the word on the street is that the unit costs of Grok are kind of really off the charts compared to Nvidia, right? Like a $20,000 Nvidia computer versus several million Cerebras or Grok, right? And even if you have a speed up, it's like, is that worth that much more? It depends for which customer, right? People are going to try. People are going to try different architectures. I think on a five-year time scale, thermodynamic computing is actually going to legitimately be disruptive to their game plans. And so, again, not financial advice, but on a 10-year time scale, I'm not
really
bullish.
Interesting.
Yeah.
One company I wanted to point out to you, I'm sure you know it already, but if you don't, Mythic AI is doing something a little unusual. These guys came across my desk.
They're still around. Yeah, they're doing edge AI, analog multiplications. It's very hard to scale analog multiplications. You had all sorts of manufacturing variants and idiosyncrasies. But they seem to have put a chip together that seems to work for the edge. So that's interesting. But the thing is, if you're not doing the whole computation energy efficiently, then your kind of energy efficiency gains get eroded away. So if they're just doing the matmuls, it's good for signal processing and so on. But I don't know if it's it's not gonna kill Nvidia, right? Anyway, that's my comment on that.
I think AMD might make it. I've seen a lot
AMD?
of dudes. Yeah, I've seen a lot of dudes try the MI300s now, and they're like, yeah, we can do full training runs. Alpine's Magnum models, I think they're like 12 on the leaderboard. Those are all done on AMD.
Yep.
They kind of work now.
I saw that. Yeah, I mean,
even with all of George Hotz's ranting, like people are managing to get them to work because the hardware's good. That's the thing with AMD.
Yeah, maybe I should buy. Do they have a server chip?
Yeah, the MI300 or MI350, and they're working like you can actually do stuff with them that you can't do with 8X H100s, because on the MI300 you can train it at a longer context if you use those. Now there's still AMD like doesn't seem to have like proper engineers doing the drivers yet and stuff, but like they're starting to work.
Yeah,
And
it's all about, does it work with Torch, right? At the end of the day. So,
but it kind of is. You're just pushing it through.
that's a big deal. I mean, that's possibly a big deal. We'll see, right? I mean, if there's new generation coming from Nvidia as well. So,
as for Intel, I don't even know if they have like GQA working. Yeah, group query attention between their chips. That's why nobody was training on Intel. They didn't have GQA working on their driver. So you can't train Llama 3. You can't train any of the Qwen models. You can only train Llama 2. Like, who's going to train that? So that's why nobody was using them, the Gaudis, because they didn't have GQA working. Like,
I don't see why you would buy like a parallel chip like that from Intel. But I'm bullish on Intel only for the CPUs.
like the drivers are still good, but it's just too fragmented. It's not like stuff doesn't work with Intel. I don't know. You keep hearing a lot of stuff like 5-6 years ago, the diversity quotas caused a lot of the people that they're like, oh, why are all the people that know how to write the drivers of like a certain ethnicity, and you have to do quotas. So they're like actually firing the people who've been there for like 20 years. Heard that from like actual engineers there. And yeah, so things went great from but that's just like one nail in the coffin. It's a lot of other.
John, why are you bullish on Intel? People ask me every single day about Intel, and I'm curious. I'm actually also bullish as well, but what do you see there?
Well, I don't think they're going to reach NVIDIA's current cap or anything like that, but I agree with Beth earlier saying I think NVIDIA, I'm kind of bearish on NVIDIA on like the 10-year time scale, because basically the way I would put it is among classical compute, you have almost like the American politics left-wing, right-wing split between chips that are like more sequential and conditional, like CPUs, and then chips that are more parallel GPUs. And I think that the GPUs will not be worth as much as they are today in the long future, because I'm assuming that AI is going to move to some other substrate, or at least there's a decent likelihood of it. And I also think that CPUs will probably pick up more of the share of work in AI. I have personal reasons for this because we use CPUs very heavily in our work compared to most of our peers. Not like instead of GPUs, but to a very extreme extent. And I think that they're undervalued because of that. So I feel like the general market sentiment is people that don't understand the nuances enough, like as you could probably tell from the like quantum boom the past few days, even though the information had been public for a while and so on. So I just think that Intel is probably undervalued by a portion of the speculators in the market that can't accurately judge like why is Nvidia worth so much more today. Does that make sense?
It does, but one thing I'd throw out there is what will Intel look like vis-a-vis AMD over the next few generations? Does it matter that they've lost a lot of share and margin, or is there something coming in the horizon that might normalize that? Or because ultimately Nvidia hasn't been a huge problem for Intel. I think Intel has been a huge problem for Intel.
Yeah, I don't know. I'm in both AMD and Intel, so I really have no directional bet on between the two for CPUs.
You're just long CPUs.
Yeah, I think that like if you're gonna buy Nvidia, like say you're a long-term, okay, I don't want to give advice, but in my view, like the reason why I did this, I hold Nvidia, but I also want to hold the CPUs because I think that they're undervalued relative to GPUs in terms of their speculative value.
What about Apple?
Yeah, I also have Apple.
Apple seems
But
to me
Apple
like
GPUs are Apple GPUs.
Apple, like, I'm not that bullish on Apple's chips because I feel like they're just going to keep them internal forever. Like,
look, their CPUs are like on the new M4 Pro. I think the CPU gets like 40% of the tokens per second compared to the GPU. Like, that's not small.
It's incredible. I mean,
yeah.
I just don't know why they wouldn't make a server chip.
Their GPUs are slow though. They just don't have enough flops. So they might still pull through. You never know. Like, they just pull a design through. And honestly, the whole thing with Intel is like they still have some kind of vertical integration, and that the Gaudi 3s are actually not that bad. So it's more like you're taking a risk. They might just pull it all together. It's not like they're missing something at Intel. Like there is still a chance they might just be able to fix everything because they do have all the pieces. Gaudi 3 is not bad. They do have open source drivers. They're just like a mess, but they just need to delete stuff. Like they literally just need to delete. If crap is like 3 months old, it should just be deleted.